Welcome to the Passive Mobile Home Park Investing Podcast with your host, Andrew Keel. This is the podcast where you can get the education you need to invest 100% passively in the highly profitable niche of mobile home parks.
Welcome to the Passive Mobile Home Park Investing Podcast. This is your host, Andrew Keel. And today we have a couple of amazing guests in Mr. Demetre Booker and Gretchen Zucker of Elevate Commercial. Before we dive in, I want to ask a real quick favor. Would you mind taking an extra 30 seconds and heading over to iTunes to rate this podcast with 5 stars? This helps us get more listeners, and it means the absolute world to me. So thanks for making my day with that 5-star review of the show. All right, let's dive in. Elevate Commercial is a full-service, socially responsible, and vertically integrated commercial real estate firm. Since 2015, the firm has either acquired, partnered, and or consulted on over 1,300 workforce housing multifamily units and over 1,400 mobile home park lots, over 113,000 square feet of retail, and a medical office building. Demetre previously served as the Director of Acquisitions for Comunidad Realty Partners and was directly involved in the acquisition and disposition of over 2,000 multifamily units. Gretchen has a career working with social entrepreneurs, and she works with around 4,000 entrepreneurs over 90 countries. Demetre and Gretchen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, happy to dive in here. Demetre, maybe we can start with you. Can you tell us about your story and how you got into manufactured housing?
Yeah, Andrew, it's my path to this industry was unique. I'm from a middle class family in Fresno, California. Went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and during college started buying and investing into commercial real estate. Fast forward, I like you said, I cut my teeth running acquisitions for Comunidad Realty Partners. And through a conference that we were at, Scott Shield's conference, I met a gentleman by the name of Jeremiah Boucher. And I spoke on stage about what I did in the multifamily world. Jeremiah pulled me aside, said, "Hey, I need your advice on my portfolio. Can you fly into Vegas and come look at what we're doing?" And during that engagement, I was blown away of the opportunity in the MH space. And so I initially started off by consulting Jeremiah on his deals as far as structuring his portfolio to sell. And then we partnered up on a deal. And from there, it led to a second deal. And then from there, we're off and running. And we learned the nuances of the industry and applied all the best practices from multifamily and workforce housing. And here we are today with a clear focus on scaling in this industry.
That is fantastic. And that's how we met, was at the Scott Shields Commercial Academy, the Diamond Inner Circle there. So that is really awesome. I'm going to have to get Jeremiah on the show. I think he could add a lot of value. So stay tuned for a future episode with him. Gretchen, maybe you can, give us a little bit of your story and, how you and Demetre ended up partnering together.
I think we should put on an advertisement for the Scott Shield Commercial Academy, because that's how I met Demetre. I was at
Awesome.
a Scott Shield Commercial Academy event, and what really attracted me to Demetre and his mobile home park and other investing is his socially responsible approach. And my experience working with social entrepreneurs seemed a natural fit with Demetre's vision. And I think through this network of these amazing social entrepreneurs and all their innovative approaches to solving many of our problems in the world, we can bring a lot of really powerful ideas that can have real impact in the lives of our mobile home park residents. So that's the initial kind of idea that brought Demetre and me together. And we've started experimenting already in several mobile home parks. And the plan is that we'll continue to grow and learn and really engage our residents in being leaders together with us in uplifting these communities. And through the uplifting of these communities, frankly, also providing a really good return to our investors. So they get financial return in part because of the impact but they also get an impact or a social return, which I think is increasingly appealing to investors in all asset classes.
Oh, definitely. That's fantastic. What are some examples of that social impact?
Well, what we learned in mobile home parks generally, and we're still learning, obviously, is that in many communities, people end up living in these communities for a long time, but they haven't necessarily envisioned that they would be long-term residents in these communities. So it feels kind of transient, if not in actuality, in people's mindsets. And so just being invested in your community and really wanting to build a community of people and to make your neighborhood look beautiful and be a place that you're really proud of is not naturally there, and at least in the mobile home parks where we've been working. And so one of the first things that we've been doing is bringing the community together to really get to know each other as neighbors and to become invested in the community. So an example of what we just did recently, which was a ton of fun, both for the investors like me, as well as for the residents themselves, is we brought a whole bunch of residents together with investors and Elevate staff and Ashoka fellow, a social entrepreneurs organization called Youth Build. And we beautified about 8 homes in one of our mobile home parks. The residents were painting each other's homes alongside these Youth Build apprentices in the construction industry. They had never met each other before, and they were painting each other's homes side by side. And that's just one example of starting to foster a sense of community. So
I love that. That's really awesome. Wow. Very cool. Yeah. Different look on the business entirely. I'll just throw this question out there and you guys can take it. What has been the toughest hurdle for you both thus far in the business?
The toughest hurdle has been cultivating talent from the on-site management position. And so, coming from a multifamily background, you have established management companies, where in the MH space, you're better off forming your own management company, which means you build the infrastructure around it, and then you're seeking out the best talent. And there's not many mobile home park on-site managers walking around besides who's on your site when you buy the property. And so then there's the factor of risk management, best practices, what are the pros and cons of that person, their skill sets, their financial literacy, et cetera. And because we empower managers to be involved and understand our social impact platform, but also, there's the basic blocking and tackling that you have to do. And so we try to provide as much support around our managers, but that's the key, is finding the right talent to fit the role, and then we can coach and build around them.
Spoken like a true ex-football player. I did notice the analogy. Demetre did play quarterback and some corner, right, at Cal Poly back in the day.
Yeah, quarterback and safety. Yeah.
Oh, safety. Okay, awesome. Very cool.
Sorry, I'll just add that Demetre sets up, so we have a site call for each site, and we do offense, and then we do defense by Demetre. So
and special teams.
Special teams, exactly.
Those are title trackers.
For all of our offensive plays, and then the defensive plays, and then special teams.
I love that. That is so cool. I played football in college as well, so I'm a huge fan of the football analogies.
Yeah. Well, it's offense is income, defense is expenses, which is just as important, and then special teams is all your intangibles: selling homes, leasing, title search, etc.
Love that. Yeah, that's the first time I've heard of that. Very cool. So the management of your parks, how do you all do that? How long have you been managing communities? Mm-hmm. Tell us about your team and how that's been going and how you've been successful with it.
Yeah, so the first park we managed was a partnership with Patriot Parks. We took over management in the first few weeks of ownership, and we learned the business. And so how we developed our management culture and systems since is a high emphasis on resident communication as far as the message, and Gretchen's and her team is heavily involved with messaging. Number 2, we're someone from our team, whether it's our investors are heavily involved. So typically someone from our team is at the site every 2 or 3 weeks. So we have a lot of site visits, a lot of support, and we're constantly doing team syncs for each property every week that we get on, and our whole asset management team is on, including myself. and the on-site manager and maintenance technicians, whether they're a contract or are employed. And so that's our system of management that we have in place as far as operating properties.
That's great. Yeah, that you're getting on site so often. I think that's a huge value to the communities, just to see what's going on and having boots on the ground. There's no replacement for that. So I've seen that firsthand. And when did you all buy your first community? What year was that again?
That was in 2016, 17.
16, 17. Awesome. Very cool. And how do you typically source your mobile home park deals?
That's our some stuff is obvious and we have a secret sauce. So there's three main ways that we source deals. One is the local real estate eviction attorneys that we work with. They typically know a lot of the park owners. Occasionally we'll get off-market deals from brokers. And then a third source, which has been our bread and butter, is the mobile home park movers. So we built a relationship with a lot of the movers. Obviously, your movers in-house, but we built a relationship with movers, and from there, we make sure that we communicate well and build relationships because they're talking to the property owners. And then a fourth, which is a quasi-mover, is vendors. Vendors. Skirting, siding. Typically, those vendors are servicing the other parks nearby, and so we try to build relationships through their vendors to talk to the other property owners.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely not your run-of-the-mill ways of finding deals. So I love that. It's creative. Tell me this, a lot of our listeners are passive investors, just strictly limited partners. If you were talking to a passive investor that has not invested into the mobile home park space yet, what would you tell them are the most important things that they need to look out for prior to making an investment?
I think we have two. I'll love for Gretchen to share her feedback, and then I'll have a few comments also.
As a passive investor, I think the biggest thing, at least for me, is the quality of the management team that's really going to be operating the mobile home park, and how, what their track record is, whether they're personally invested in the asset themselves. I certainly look at the financials. I spend a lot of time, looking at the financial model for each investment that I do. But I'm also really interested to know kind of overall what the market is looking like, how this park is going to operate, 5-10 years from now, to the extent that you can really kind of forecast what job growth is going to look like, population growth, et cetera. So very aligned with the same, I think, factors that the operator itself would be evaluating as they're looking to buy the park. And the more that you can align so that you're doing this together as partners, I think the more successful it will be. I think what makes Elevate unique is the opportunity for investors like me to be personally involved. And I think one thing in particular about Demetre that every passive investor should want to work with Demetre, in part because of the opportunity to learn from Demetre. How you manage to have time for everyone is kind of amazing. And of course, I'll have to say that the social impact specifically of Elevate, I think is clearly really important to me, but I think it's been really important to all of our investors too. So they want to feel like this investment is doing more than just making money. And it's making good money, but it's also having real impact on real people's lives. I think sometimes we forget about that when we're evaluating deals or thinking about, investing in property. You think of just the land or the infrastructure, but you forget the people who are there. And Elevate does not forget the people. They're really central to what we do. Which, by the way, going back to the management of the site management and all of our management positions, all the staffing positions, I think that the mission is a key part of attracting and retaining the right kind of talent. So entrepreneurial problem solvers with good people skills, empathy skills, all of that is what you want in your talent. And I think we're able to attract that talent in large part because of the mission.
That's wonderful. That's really wonderful. And I want to circle back and talk more about the socially responsible approach and kind of that mission. But Demetre, if you could touch on, what your advice for passive investors would be, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and this is I'll piggyback on what Gretchen shared, but I've noticed a lot of investors are looking at depreciation nowadays, the opportunity of the benefit of a cost segregation and what leads to depreciation benefits for the investors. And so number one, just be aware of the business plan. If that property is going to be, sold in 2 or 3 years, think about the recapture of that depreciation. Number two, understand that, if you're going to invest, make sure that there's some, it's not about increasing rents $100 and displacing people. Look at the mission of the group and can they achieve the returns that you're looking for without displacing families? Because it's, in some cases, it's 30-40% increases in rents that we see where we have an internal mandate to where we don't have to increase rents anywhere near that, but we still hit the same returns or better. And then we're getting better pricing from our lenders and Fannie Mae and whatnot. So there's some benefits to add a social impact component to what you do. And then the third thing is understanding the property itself. Is there the rule of thumb that we do is we say, hey, in that immediate market, for the price of a mobile home, if we have a mobile home that's selling for $30,000, our single family homes in the area selling for $300,000, and we look for our target is what we call a sweet deal, is a 10x. If the single family homes are selling for 10 times the price of a mobile home, I think we have some traction there. And you usually have a very high demand for people wanting to buy homes, whether it's a lease option or buy cash. And so we've been advancing and adjusting our model internally of our deal selection based on target market. Is there a market for people to buy a home? Also know that then the fifth thing is, what is the business plan? If there's a property that's 50% occupied, there's usually a reason why. There's very few operators like you, Andrew, that can fill up a park like that. And so understand your operator and their capacity to fill lots, because it's not as simple as multifamily. So when someone says, hey, my business plan is to go from 50% to 100% in 1 year, it's not realistic in most cases, unless it's a market where you can bring in brand new homes and use homes and sell them for a premium. But if it's a market where you're losing money per home, you may want to look at that business plan is not feasible.
That's great advice. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I think one thing you both touched on is just that quality of the management team, the quality of the operator. What's their track record tell you? And that's something that has resonated across all of our interviews as the most important factor. And I think that's cool that I didn't even give you that hint, and that's what you came up with. So let's circle back and talk about that socially responsible approach. And maybe you can just add a couple more examples. I know you mentioned the limits on your rent increases. I think that's really cool. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit more of how you add that value without, displacing families.
I'm gonna let Rachel run, or Gretchen run with it, because she could take the rest of the 30 minutes, and she has a lot of good stuff that we do.
Rachel, by the way, is one of our other investors who's been a huge advisor for us. So the idea is really, it's about helping our residents to develop agency so that they can take initiative, they can have more control of their lives and impact on each other's lives. And so part of it, as I mentioned before, is increasing the sense of community and investment in the community. And part of it's really empowering our residents. Another example of what we'll be working on is having the kids design a playground, and then the community actually builds the playground. And so that it's a shared sort of thing that we're creating together. And then we get to see the result of what we've done. We are also working on just financial stability for our residents. And this colleague of ours I mentioned has been very influential. She wrote a book called The Financial Diaries that I would highly recommend if people are interested in sort of what lives are like of people who live in mobile home parks. And so one of the biggest challenges that residents have is that their income will spike and dip. So it's very uneven, the income, and same with expenses. So it makes it really hard then to manage your monthly bills if your income keeps going up and down and your expenses are going up and down. So we are looking at ways to help them smooth out their expenses. And one way is by working with our residents to develop rent payment programs that work for them. So there are a number of services started by other social entrepreneurs that I think are really promising So we're working currently with Till and Esusu. We're also talking with a company called Circa. And this is really addressing the problem that most renters have, which is that their biggest bill is their rent. And their rent is due at the first of the month when they have the least amount of money in their bank account. So what these platforms do is they really help residents break their rent expenses into more bite-sized chunks that allow them to be able to stay on top of those bills. We are going to go into setting up saving circles, so ways for residents to save money by working together collectively, and other programs that I think will help them with financial well-being, which obviously is going to make them a better tenant for us. Other areas will be in, so we talked a bit about sort of their mindset as change makers, about financial stability. We're also looking at ways to support their financial mobility so that they're able to increase their income over time. So there are amazing opportunities out there that they've probably never heard of that would provide different ways for them to augment their income or upskill their skill set to have better paying jobs. So that's part of the equation. And then health and well-being as well. And so there are, again, amazing programs that can really support residents' mental and physical health, that it's just a matter of connecting the dots and making these available.
That is so cool.
The idea is that there'll be, change agents who can make the overall community better and their own lives better and help create a thriving community.
I love how you guys lead with that. And, it's a huge differentiator. So kudos to both of you. How would you handle, a non-paying resident? I know you have some programs, you're working with the residents. How do you all handle that? And, do you evict or do you not allow that?
Yeah, Andrew, that's a good question. We try within our power not to evict a resident. There has been a few evictions and it hurts each one. It's tough to deal with, but our mitigation against eviction is, again, we were the first mobile home park community operator to have the rental assistance through Esusu and Till. And so that's a major breakthrough because it took some time to get them to commit to the industry because they're predominantly multifamily. And so that was a breakthrough that other operators may be able to use now that we open up the doors, or they open the doors for us. Number two, we often reach out, and this is partners, not just myself, but Gretchen and other partners will reach out to severe delinquent residents and work out solutions. Often it's through a payment plan or, again, Esusu and Till, or B, there's a lot of skilled labor in these communities. And so we look at ways to, if they're underemployed, to employ them temporarily, to support them, to put them involved with our culture, with our team, so that therefore they could go back into the workforce. But during that time frame, they can actually do work for us at our properties, whether it's mowing lawns and vacant lots, or helping clean up the communities. And so therefore there's a sense of dignity, and we, half their money goes towards their rent, half goes to their pockets, they can pay their bills, and we provide the financial stability to get them back on track. And we know they're going to be setbacks along the way. And so we collectively look to find ways to keep our residents employed or give them opportunities within our community to get back on track.
That's very cool. And before we move on from this, what was the name? Is it Esusu and Till? Is that what it was called?
Yes.
Okay. And I'll make sure to get the links to those and put them in the show notes because I think that's a cool tip other operators will want to use. So tell us this: what does the perfect mobile home park look like, and why?
None of them are perfect. When we consider, using football as an analogy, a 5-star recruit. So when we look for a 5-star recruit, we're looking for opportunities on the coast, 100 plus lots. There's a property in Southern California that we're chasing, that it's the 5 freeway in Southern California. West of the 5 is beach. So it's west of the 5. It's sizable. It's over 120 lots. It has curbs and gutters and sidewalks. And you're dealing with a very decent class of residents. And so that's what we call the holy grail or 5-star recruit. And so those are the unicorns that we go after. And, public utilities, we want public sewer, public water, and then our other 5-star recruit are just resort areas that may not have all the bells and whistles, but they're resort areas where the affordability is less than 5%. We call that our 5 stars because we collect rent in those parks without increasing rent significantly, and they're a lot easier to operate.
Definitely. Gretchen, do you have any comments on that?
No, just quickly about Esusu, because you were going to put that link. I think it's also valuable to know a little bit more about that. So just very briefly, Esusu is a credit reporting platform. So every time our residents pay their rent on time, that's reported to the credit bureaus, which allows our residents to increase their credit score. And I think on average, they're able to help residents increase their credit score by about 170 points or so. So that's very meaningful for our residents. And they also provide 0 interest loans for up to 3 months worth of rent with a 15-month repayment plan in case residents have a financial emergency. And so we have triggered that with a couple of our residents so far. And hopefully, we can't keep going back to Esusu for loans. So they really need to work on their financial stability. But many, as you learn this when you study people, people living on the edge of poverty, that one, broken down car will set you on a path of kind of further impoverishing you. It's a downward cycle. And so that's what Esusu is trying to do, is to avoid that downward cycle for residents. They pay the landlord directly. So we get up to 3 months of rent in our bank account, and then Esusu will work with the resident to help them with that repayment plan, which then turns into an Esusu savings plan. So after they repay their rent, they can keep going, and it becomes a savings vehicle for the resident. So it's this
That
kind
is
of
very cool. Yeah.
Financial services in particular for the generally unbanked or underbanked population. But I think it's tremendously exciting, and it's a win-win for our residents and for landlords.
Yeah, no, I really like that. We use PayLease, which integrates with Rent Manager, and PayLease has an option where the residents can subscribe to get the positive, credit reporting, and it doesn't report any negatives. It only reports the positives. However, most residents don't opt in. We did like an initiative and handout to a lot of our residents, and they didn't opt into that. And there's no real downside. So I think the other thing is a lot of our residents, for whatever reason, don't have bank accounts. And what we've found out is a lot of it is like either past due child support or other, garnishing of wages that is preventing them from doing that. So that might not be, a solution for that resident, but I think it's really cool, especially the 0% interest loan option. That's a very cool initiative.
Yeah, so underbanked poor families is a huge problem, the dearth of financial services. Happily, there are some disruptors who are getting into this space, and I think that that's going to yield some great, less expensive. So for poor people, they spend up to 10% of their income just using their income through
cashing checks and so forth.
Yeah,
it's crazy how expensive it is to be poor. So that's where I think these social entrepreneurs coming into the space could add real value that, of course, then helps our tenants be better tenants. So it's very exciting. You could consider having the residents opt out instead of opting into the credit reporting. Again, so there's another book I would recommend for anyone working in the mobile home park.
We did look into that because I remember in the state of Florida with your driver's license, you're automatically an organ donor unless you opt out. And the percentages were way higher, but the way that the software is set up, it wouldn't.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess it depends on what provider you're working with. And you should certainly look at the laws in that particular state, which these service providers can look at too for you.
Totally. Very cool. Well, let's jump back in here, and I will put that link to Esusu in the show notes because I definitely want to look at that myself. What common mistakes do new operators make in the space? Maybe on pro formas or so forth. I mean, I know I made many when I first started, but I think this would be good to talk on, for investors interested in maybe investing with a newer operator.
Yeah, the number one mistake that I see, and I made this mistake also, is budgeting for new lots, to fill lots. So what it costs to improve your infrastructure, move a mobile home, remodel the mobile home if it's used, or buying a new mobile home, there's a lot of costs into the infrastructure. So before you buy a property, understand that within that state or jurisdiction, is it concrete pads? Is it concrete runners? Is it posts and piers as far as your foundation to hold the home? Because you're responsible for providing the foundation, but also you're responsible for providing the utilities, and particularly, the electricity, which the meter boxes can be very expensive. So I just see these operators are underestimating, including myself at first, the cost to fill a lot, and you have to make sure that your budget is correct and you understand what you're getting into.
Do you have a ballpark number you use to fill a vacant lot?
Yeah, if it's a concrete pad, just to get the lot prepared for a home to be there, we're probably going to be we budget for about $15,000 now,
Wow.
and that's for concrete pad. Concrete runners were about 10,000. That's including moving the home. That's not even the physical home, but moving the utilities, skirting, all the bells and whistles. 15,000 for concrete pads, 10,000 for runners. Post and piers about 8,000. So that's what we're seeing just to prep the lots, and that's just factoring hit or misses on electricity because the conduit and whatnot.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's expensive. I'm sure a lot of your parks are in like the Pacific Northwest, right?
They're all over Idaho,
Oh.
Ohio, Pennsylvania.
Okay, gotcha. Gretchen, what other mistakes do you see that new operators make?
Demetre doesn't make any mistakes. I would say one thing that we've learned, which is a valuable lesson that we can share, is there's a temptation to hire family members of your employees. Really think twice before you do it. It's my husband or my cousin or would be great for this job, and you want to be supportive. And then I think we've realized that we're better off just really doing our due diligence in our search and selection of all of our staff members to make sure we really have the best people for the job.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's a big deal for sure. I'll ask you both this question. When was the toughest time for the mobile home park industry, and why? That you both are aware of.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the toughest time is on the horizon. But it's bottom line is the toughest time is obviously when the market turns, right? Because this resident base has the most vulnerability, the biggest risk as far as paying their rent and life changes. So just in general, whenever there's a turn in the market, being prepared and understanding your resident base, that your delinquency may not be 2%, 3%, it may increase. And so just being aware of it and planning for it, and make sure that you qualify your residents properly. You measure twice, cut once on leasing spaces, because it really, taking the mortgage background that I have into the equation, it's important to understand what your resident base income is and the opportunities around for job mobility. But yeah, it's bottom line is it's when the market turns and defaults increase. I've lived through it early on in my career. It wasn't in mobile home communities, but it was in multifamily. And when the market turns and people are defaulting, if you don't have that in your pro forma or your stress test, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, you did mention, you think the toughest times are ahead. Maybe you could shed a little light on what you think specifically mobile home parks, what headwinds they're going to face.
Yes, most of these performers that I see where they're looking at substantial rent growth year over year. It comes to a point. Yes, we're more resilient because of compared to multifamily rental rates. Typically, it's less than 50% in some cases. But you got to be aware if you're buying in areas where your mobile home park lot rents are near your apartment rents. When the market turn, you're gonna have some trouble. So we try to tell people to be aware of what's on the horizon, and because there will be higher defaults, but also we want to make sure that you're buying or investing into communities where there are markets where apartment rents might be 3 times the lot rent. So therefore, you're more resilient if there's a change in the market, and you have to maintain rents, and you have stable growth in rents or no growth. So I just think we performa to a one-time rent increase and then a 3% annual increase. That's our performa. And if our deals produce the multiple that our investors are looking for and the pref, then we're happy. And that's our way of being resilient for the market. We may do 4 or 5%, but our mandate is 3% rent growth, and that's what we banking on. We don't. I see a lot of performance where there's $100 rent increase year 1 or year 2, and then year 3 is $25 a year, and next your rent's double in 2 years. I just don't see that being sustainable because it's just historically we haven't seen rent growth like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. Gretchen, did you have any insights into the mobile home community industry? A lot of people have brought up when Green Tree back in the 90s, when they were a lender on mobile homes, how they went under, and there was a lot of homes being pulled out of parks and being repoed. I've heard that was one of the tougher times in the industry, but I didn't own communities during the Great Recession. So I've tried to talk to people that did and learn from them. And as you mentioned, those stress test factors, what are some of those? Do you pro forma for 60% collections? Is that too aggressive? I mean, it's a lot different from multifamily, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I think also looking at loan to value, what that rate or ratio is something else. So not taking on too much debt, and is this good debt that you're taking on? We've been generally aiming for agency debt, and I think Fannie Mae has been a great partner for us. I think they're quite invested. In fact, looking to us to be kind of to support them with their kind of social impact goals as an agency. The one thing I would add is that I totally believe that manufactured housing is one of our solutions as a society for how to have more affordable housing. And at the same time, my worry is that the cost of manufactured housing is going up too. So it's obviously still significantly less expensive than site-built homes. And I think that there's a very strong future for manufactured housing. There's actually a social entrepreneur who's gotten double wide manufactured homes with a front porch. That's not considered real property, which I think is a big advancement to have a HUD code to make that real property. You can get a mortgage for that. And so that is totally one of, a necessary component of having more affordable housing in the US. But I do worry that even manufactured housing is getting more expensive. So that's probably my biggest worry.
Yeah, no, those are very, very valid points. I think the other thing would be, headwinds regulatory wise with rent control and some other, just change in policies that we could be facing. Wow, we've run a little long on this episode. I'm so thankful for your time. If listeners would like to get a hold of both of you, what would be the best way for them to do so?
I'll take the lead. We could share our information in the chat, our email and mobile numbers, so they could call us or email us directly.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll put those in the show notes. What is your website, Demetre?
Yeah, it's www.elevatesmg.com, and we'll share it with you in the chat.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you both, Demetre, Gretchen, for all of your insights. I love the social impact and that look at the business and getting rid of the stigma of trailer parks, because as new operators come in and improve these communities, it makes them better. And again, like you mentioned, Gretchen, it improves the supply of affordable housing, which I think we need desperately. So thanks again, both of you. That's it for today, folks. Thank you all so much for tuning in.
Thank you.
Hey, are you getting value out of this show? If so, would you mind please going over to iTunes and leaving the show a quick 5-star review? I have a goal of hitting over 100 5-star reviews by the end of 2021. and it would mean the absolute world to me if you could help contribute to that. Thanks ahead of time for making my day with your 5-star review of the show.